were having a show debate the other day, and this is about Justin Fields, and it's not about starting on opening day, so I don't want you to start raging about these questions already. It was about preseason action, because my expectation, I think it was Waddle and me were arguing about it, that Waddle thought that, I'm assuming that's common sense for the Bears. But my assumption is that there's going to be a lot of reps for Justin Fields in the 3 preseason games. That will be the time for growth. That will be the time to learn. Sure, Dalton will be on the field. Is your expectation that we're going to get a lot of Justin Fields in the preseason?
Yes, that is definitely my expectation. That's the internal expectation from House Hall, that he's going to see a lot of game reps in those 3 preseason games. And that's a big deal, right, for his development. That's where he's going to get his early seasoning and his early chance to feel out the speed of the NFL game and what this looks like. And so mark your calendars for those weekends, right? It's I think the 7th to 14th, 14th, 21st, and 28th are the 3 preseason games. Be ready, because that's going to be your chance to see this kid throw. We know that we can't make too much out of preseason action, but that's the sample size that we're going to have early on, and it's going to be very intriguing to watch him show what he can do.
And don't be surprised if the head coach surprises you with some unconventional decisions, as history has taught us. Where are you at with this quarterback situation? If you had to put your money down today on when Justin Fields would be under center, when would that be?
So are you ready for me to give you guys a new worry?
Nothing really worries me, but yeah.
No, I've got a new worry for you, because I think talking to some folks around the league and folks that are tapped into this a little bit, I think there's a unsettling lack of clarity for the coaching staff in knowing where their status is with their bosses, with George McCaskey and Ted Phillips. Listen, you guys remember the infamous press conference from January that was so haywire, with Ted and George trying to give the vision for this organization. And one of the things that they both said that they were going to be judging in 2021 was, I think the words improvement and progress were used by George and Ted repeatedly. Well, what does that mean? And so I think there's an unsettling lack of clarity for Matt and his staff on what do we need to do to retain the confidence and trust of our bosses, right? And does that mean that we have to win 10 games and get in the playoffs? And there, I think, is an unsettled feeling that maybe that is what that means. Look, I think everybody in the public would have agreed in January that you can't say, oh, you need to promise Ryan and Matt 2022 and beyond. Well, things changed a little bit on draft weekend when they drafted Fields, but I'm not sure they changed internally with the expectations. And so here's why I'm worried, because if that drives your decision to start Andy Dalton longer than you otherwise would have for the long-term health of the franchise, because you're trying to squeeze out 2-3 extra wins that you don't think Fields could get you, and all of a sudden you delay the development of your potential franchise quarterback because you're worried about winning games in 2021 rather than setting this franchise up for the long haul, now you understand where the anxiety comes in. And so we haven't heard from George since January. We haven't really heard from Ted since January, other than the statement to say they're looking into Arlington Park. And so I think there needs to be more clarity, at least internally, and if they want to express it externally, on what the bar is for this team this year and how they're going to be going into their year-end evaluations. I think it's critical, because it's all tied into these quarterback decisions. That's where I'm a little bit unsettled right now.
All right, which future is looking better? Is it the Pace Nagy combo, or is it the future of Arlington Heights?
That's a good question. I mean, if I had to put money on one of those two, I would say Arlington Heights, because it just seems to make the most sense for a long-term sort of money-making proposition for an organization that could cash in with a move. But to your point about Ryan and Matt, again, it's very strange here. The Bears are on some weird ice right now, because, again, in January, y'all would have said they don't even deserve 2021, much less beyond 2021. Well, now you've got this quarterback situation that adds this intrigue to stuff, and you say, well, if you don't promise them that, and then you're changing gears, in the winter of 2022 and giving Justin Fields a new head coach and a new system to learn and making him basically start from scratch, then what was the point of going through 2021 the way you did? And so that's where this whole thing gets a little bit murky, and it gets unsettling, because you don't have great confidence in the organization to have a very steady vision and path for how to get from point A to point C.
It's funny. It resonates to me when we had a couple of conversations after the Field selection on how we were all of a sudden giving the Bears a lot of benefit of the doubts. And you compared it to, hey, the Justin Fields thing was like picking up a $100 bill that you saw in the middle of the sidewalk. You know, have you noticed all of these lists from different websites? It doesn't matter where they originate from. Top coaches, top futures, top general managers. And the Bears are always in the bottom third, if not towards the bottom, like 6 or 7 teams on that list.
Well, it just tells you how they're viewed outside city limits, right? And what the national sort of view of this team is. Lists, the only list I pay attention to is the list of Tom Waddle's top 15 most important Bears.
And that's what you should be doing.
Every other list to me is just fodder for a conversation that doesn't really mean a whole lot. But to your point, I think it gives you an idea that there isn't a whole lot of outside belief that the Bears are ready to hit a springboard and become a team that's in the playoffs for 6 of the next 8 years and taking swings at the Super Bowl annually. All of that hinges on who Justin Fields is as a quarterback, and that's why I'm so excited to get back out there in person, to ask questions in person, to watch practice in person, and just watch his development. We're going to learn a lot in these 6 weeks. You may not, be able to see 10 years into the future from these 6 weeks, but you're going to see what Justin's strengths are. You're going to see what some of his weaknesses are. You're going to see whether there's that command there. I'll tell you the one word that comes up consistently from folks inside of Hallis Hall about why Justin Fields is different than pretty much anyone that they've ever been around at that position. It's presence, right? He just has this presence that makes everyone around him believe that not only is he super talented and capable of clearing the highest hurdles in this league, but that he can make all of them better, and he's going to put in the work every single day to drive that train. And so that I think that presence is energizing, and I think that's going to be a great starting point for Justin. Obviously, he's going to learn behind Andy for a little while, and Andy's about as low maintenance of a guy as you could have in an awkward situation like this.
These conversations, and this is not directed at you, Dan, these conversations about the lack of communication between the coaching and the general manager and the front office, and the concept that a group would allow the same crew to pick the next quarterback when the beef from the coach is that the previous quarterback wasn't my selection. So if you fire him at the end of this year, you're bringing in another coach to coach a guy that wasn't his pick. Like the circular idiocy of even having this conversation, and again, it's not directed at you, is dizzying and nauseating, because if you have a scintilla of a lack of trust in the people that you have chosen to make these decisions, you don't let them make the decisions again. So if you had questions about them going into this draft, you should have fired their asses before the draft took place.
But maybe they don't get Fields then.
Okay, well, I'm
with you. Everything you say makes sense, but at least they got Fields, right?
Well, you say that, but the next coach they hire may not have picked Fields. It may not have been his guy. He may be your guy, but it may not be the next coach's guy, and now you found yourself in the same dilemma you had now with Mitch.
You understand why I asked a minute ago, are you ready for some worry? Because I was hesitant.
I just had a stroke.
I was hesitant to bring that onto your plate. I was hesitant to ruin your Thursday in the way I've ruined it.
You were right.
But this is the problem. And look, like beyond Ted's cockamamie quote from January, we said everything's in place but the wins and the quarterback. The thing that bothered me was George laid out a bar at the start of last season and said, I really want to learn whether this team is more like the 2019 Bears or the 2018 Bears. And we got a definitive answer on that. They were identical to the 2019 Bears, only that they lost 6 games in a row instead of 4 games in a row. Finished 8-8, got that backdoor entry into the playoffs. And so they were exactly what George wanted to find out. More like the 2019 Bears than the 2018 Bears, and there were no consequences for it. The consequences were, let's have 2 days of closed-doors meetings, discuss this, try to figure out if you guys can still do this. Okay, you've got our trust, you've got our belief, go do it. And then now we don't have clarity on exactly what the bar is for 2021. And George is going to have to articulate that. Again, if he doesn't want to do it externally, he better make sure that those guys inside the building know that, so that they're operating with vision rather than self-preservation instincts, right? And that's what worries me, because as soon as you get into self-preservation instincts, all of a sudden the long-term health of the franchise is in big trouble.
Dan, great stuff. Love talking to you. We'll talk next week with real football going on.
Guys, I am going to be able to use my key card on the door of Hallis Hall next week. You don't understand what that means.
That's great news, too.
You sound so fired up. It sounds like you got a few golf trips in maybe this summer, too, to sort of refuel.
I sure did. I'm hitting the ball as well as I've ever hit it.
Nice.
I can't putt worth a lick. If either of you wants to give me a putting lesson,
you got to practice. Don't be practicing the driver. Go practice your short game.
And
drive for show, putt for dough, bro.
Nothing makes better sports talk radio than a middle-aged sports writer talking about it.
We're going to talk about my fantasy football team when we come back.
That's great. Dan, great stuff.